Hello everybody, welcome to this tutorial. My name is Dennis and let's take a look at what we're going to be making for today. So this is kind of a medical slash sci-fi animation that I made recently, and I will show you guys how to recreate this whole thing from scratch. And we're going to cover a lot of different topics involving modeling, deformers, mograph, lighting, texturing, and of course compositing everything together in After Effects. So there are a lot of things to cover. Let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we want to do is to actually model our main elements. And here you see we got our pipette, which is kind of a lab equipment. We have our cell and we have our needle tip. So let's model our pipette first. Okay, so here we are in Cinema. I'm going to go to a front view and I'm going to turn on my grid so I can see it. And I'm going to select the pen tool and just roughly draw out a profile of the pipette. Doesn't have to be super precise. And I'm going to turn the spline type to a cubic. I just find that to be super easy to do, and I'm just going to move these vertices until I get kind of the shape that I'm looking for. Let's move this back, this up. Okay, I think that looks pretty close. And also I'm going to change the point, intermediate point, to uniform. And with our spline selected, I'm going to drop that into a lathe object. And right away you see that our shape is starting to form. And because everything's live, we can still go back into our spline and readjust our points, which is nice. And let's just make this look. Okay, I think that's pretty good. If we need to make more adjustment, we can always come back to it. But before I finish with this, I want to add some thickness to our geometry, because right now if you look, it's just a single layer. To do that, it's very simple. We can create a cloth surface. We can drop our lathe into it, and by default the subdivision is set to 1. We can turn that back to 0, but we can increase the thickness right here, so that adds some thickness to it. So here we go. So that's pretty good. So rename that our pipette, and let's hide that. Let's move on to our next object, which is, let's do the needle next. So to do that, I'm going to create a tube. Let's make this really tall and skinny. So let's scale in our radius here. Let's make it kind of skinny like that. And I'm also going to create a cube plus a Boolean object, and I'm going to drop both the tube and the cube into the Boolean object. And right away you see that the cube is kind of cutting out where the tube is. So I'll move the cube up here, rotate it, and make sure we're in our object mode. And right there we kind of cut out our needle tip. Pretty simple, right? And because everything's live, I can make this even a little thicker if I want to, taller. So with this selected, I'm going to hit Alt G to group it under a null object, and I'm going to name this my needle. And yeah, and also I'm going to change the anchor point so that it's closer to the top. Okay, cool. So we're done with our needle. Let's recreate our cell next. To do this, I am going to create a sphere. Okay, maybe scale this up a little bit, and I'm going to change the type to icosahedron. And I am going to make a copy of the sphere by scaling it up, holding the control key. And with both of these spheres selected, I'm going to hit Alt G again to group it under a null. And we call this my cell. And let's rename the inner sphere as our nucleus and the outer sphere as our membrane. So this is kind of our cell right now, but it doesn't look very organic because it's like a perfect sphere. And also, let's crank up our segments a little bit, just get a little more definition. So to make this a little more organic, let's add some deformation. So with my nucleus selected, I'm going to drop in a displacer deformer, and under shader, let me add a noise. So by default it does this, but let's go into the noise and let's really crank up our scale to like 1,000. Okay, maybe even 2,000. Okay, here we go. I think that's, yeah, I think that looks kind of nice, because we just want not a perfect sphere, just a little deformation. So let's duplicate our displacer into our membrane, and I think we need to make our scale even larger for this one, maybe 3,000. And we can change the random C so that it looks a little different. That doesn't look exactly the same as our nucleus. And in fact, our nucleus can be a little smaller. And our displacer object can be, we can tune back the intensity. So yeah, okay, so now I think we're getting somewhere with our cell. So next thing we want to do is to create the effect of the cell being kind of suspended underneath, I don't know, like a fluid environment, like it's underwater. And to do that it's pretty simple. You can just take your displacer object, duplicate it, go into the noise, and crank up the animation speed. And if we play this back, now we have some movements to our cell. Alright, we can do the same thing down here, duplicate this, go into our noise and crank up the animation speed. But I think it's a little moving too fast right now, so maybe we'll do half the speed. Do the same thing here, maybe do half the speed. Maybe crank up the intensity a little bit. Let's see. And you know what? I'm going to delete the one in the nucleus and just duplicate the one from the membrane to the nucleus. That way, the noise are moving together as opposed to like independently. I think that looks a little more uniform. Okay. I think that's pretty good because we just want something subtle so that it feels like there's, you know, it's moving in some kind of like thick liquid microscopic environment. Okay, so we're good. So we got our cell, and of course, like our pipette, we want to add some thickness to this whole thing. So once again, I'm gonna adding a cloth surface. Let's drop our cell in there. And of course the subdivision is set to 1. Put this back to 0 and let's crank up the thickness a little bit. And there we go. We have our cell right here. Very good. Let's rename this our cell. Okay, so now that we have most of our objects, let's bring everything back and let's start framing this and start animating this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a camera, and I'm going to look through the camera here, and I make sure my camera is not rotating, and I'm just going to frame pushing with the camera. I'm going to move my pipette to the side, and right now it's way too big, so I'm going to scale that down and rotate it 90 degrees. Oh, and for my camera, I'm going to change it from perspective to parallel. I feel like that way it gives a more cooler result, like that. Okay. I think my pipette is about the same size, but it's a little short. So because we're live, we can go back go back in, kind of just like resize everything, bring everything back. Select this point. Oops, there's another one here, another one here. Another one. Okay. Oops. Okay, there it is. Okay, that looks a little better. And where's our needle? A needle is way too big as well. Let's move this down. Let's rotate our needle so it's pointing in the right direction. Let's move this back, and now it's too small. Resize it back. Something like that should be fine. Let's rotate so we can see the hole a little better. And once again, because everything is live, you know, if we want to make this a little sharper, all we gotta do is rotate our cube in a little more, and there it is. Okay, and let's frame our shot a little better, something like that. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna lock the camera for now so that we don't accidentally move it. And I think we're ready to start animating. Oh yeah, one more thing, I almost forgot. So we got these little bubbles inside of the cell, and that's very simple to make. So to do that, I'm going to make a sphere, scale that down somewhat. We don't need as many segments, maybe like 12, half as much. And let's add a cloner object and drop a sphere into the cloner, and change the mode to object, and let's reference the nucleus. Boom. And right now, by default, the distribution is vertex. Let's change that to surface, and also check render instances. That will speed up your seeing, and we can crank up the count right here. But right now, everything is kind of the same size. So to break that up, let's duplicate the sphere, scale that down, duplicate it one more time, scale that down. Maybe scale this one down as well, and you can set the clones to random. Okay, maybe add some more clones. That's pretty good. Let's add some more. And with the cloner, we have all the effectors. So let's add a random effector real quick, and add a little more randomness to our scale. Change this. Let's see. Okay. And also we can add a plane effector, which if you go and clone your effectors, these are your effectors right here. With a plane effector, if we crank up the Z, you can kind of offset it from the middle. So this is kind of helpful for you want to position your spheres a little better. So there's that. Okay, so now I think we got everything ready to animate. So let's start animating. Let's make our timeline about 10 seconds long, which, by the way, I'm doing just HD resolution, 24 frames per second. And let's take a look at my animation and see what I did. So we have the cell coming down, the pipette coming here, kind of sucks it into it, anchors it, and the needle comes, penetrate it, and then drops some black ink fluid into it. So let's do that. So frame 0, our pipette is kind of off screen, our needle is also off screen, and our cell, I'm just going to drag the cell down the bottom here, and say maybe around 88 frames we want to end up in this position. So let's keyframe that. Let's go back to the beginning, and let's move it just up to the left a little bit, maybe rotate it somewhat. Let's keyframe that. I'm going to open up the curve editor, and I am going to make sure my tangent is not easy. I don't need it easing in from the beginning. tempo. Just make sure checking all my points. Smart rotation. Okay. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Okay. Maybe we can even do a little more rotation from the beginning. Right. Okay. Alright, let's take this back. Cool, cool. I think that works pretty good. That looks pretty good. Okay. So as this is coming in, we want the pipette to come in from the side. So let's just keyframe it somewhere here. As it's coming around here, it's gonna come in. So where does it stop? 88. Okay, so it's gonna come in right around here. Let's keyframe that. And once again, we're gonna go to the curve editor and we just have it linear from the beginning. Let's play that back. Ooh, feels a little fast, so I'm gonna drag the first keyframe back a little bit, and once again, I'm gonna fix my tangent. Let's see. Not bad, not bad. Not bad. Maybe we can slow this down slightly more and make it ease in a little more. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I think that's looking pretty good. And before I go any further, I'm going to save my file to, let's say, 5. Okay, so when this first comes in, we have a little suction kind of an action to post the cell right into it. So to do that is very simple. I am going to, I'm just going to animate the cell position. Maybe go down a couple frames and just move that in a little bit. Let's keyframe that. But around the same time, I want to create this kind of like sucking effect. So to do that, I'm going to add a bulge deformer. And what that does, if I size it up to the size of the cell, if I crank down the strength this way, and then if I move it all the way here, it kind of creates this effect. But if I turn on the fall off, let's say a sphere, I can make it so that it only affects. I can turn the fall off all the way up, affects the desired area right here. So something like that. It's pretty good. So what we can do is we can keyframe our strength. So we can start at 0, go down a couple frames, crank it up, keyframe, and then where it ends, we can go back to 0, or even we can even add a little more strength. So with this and our cell selected, we're going to open up a dope sheet so that we can see our keyframes. And we want to make sure that they end on the same keyframe. So let's play this back and see how that looks. Comes in, suck. I think our position is a little slow. Oops. So maybe we can move the entire keyframe back quicker. So let's play that back again. Let's see. Yeah, okay. You know what? That's that's fine with me. You know, this is for the purpose of this tutorial. I think it works just fine. just fine. You know, we can always spend a lot of time tweaking these things. Oops. Let's take that back. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. If we need to adjust it, we can always go back and adjust it. So let's move on to our next step, which is we have our needle coming in from the side. So let's keyframe our needle position, and then go down a couple of frames, and then move it in. So we're here, keyframe. Once again, let's make sure there's no easy E or easing when it first starts, but then you kind of ease to a stop. So let's take a look. Okay, I think the speed is good for our needle. So what we need to do now is to create this kind of penetrating effect on our cell, and that's very simple to do. All we gotta do is to use the collision deformer, and the collision deformer needs something to collide with, right? So you would think that we would use the needle, and we could, but there's like a hole in here that might cause some trouble. So what I did is I just made a sphere. And I dropped the sphere into the needle null and make sure that it's in the right position, and I hit C to make it editable, and then I just scaled the sphere so that it kind of fits the shape of the needle that I'm looking for. So something like this. So let's go to our collision deformer and add our sphere. Now let's go back and see how that looks. Okay, cool. We're getting somewhere right here. This is this default settings. So what we need to do is to change this restore shape setting and just bring that down a little bit, and that should smooth out the animation there. Smooth out the animation quite a bit. And also in the advanced settings, I find that if you turn up the stretch a little bit, I think that kind of see what that does. Okay, so that kind of helps with it. And also with both of my spheres, if I crank up their segments, the more segment they have, I think the more accurate the yeah, there it is. That seems a lot more smoother. Okay, cool. I think we're good for now. Let's copy our collision deformer into our nucleus, and let's take a look at what that does. That's pretty good. But I think the problem with the nucleus is our sphere, our collision sphere, is a little too big. So very simply, let's duplicate our sphere and just make that smaller. And at the front, like so. And for our nucleus, let's reference the smaller sphere instead, and we can delete the auto sphere. Let's take a look. Yeah, there he is. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we can hide our spheres, and we have our basic animation right here. Pretty simple, right? Okay, cool. And in my example, I had, after I injected the ink stuff, I had the needle and the pipette pull out, which is pretty much exact same thing as we, you know, as we did moving it in. So I'm just gonna skip that part. I'm sure you guys can figure it out. And so before I move on, I'm just gonna cache my my collision deformers. So with both of these selected, go to cache and just calculate. So what that does is you cache your sequence, so you can scrub back and forth and it just makes everything a lot easier to work with. Okay, so now I think we got everything we needed, and let's start doing some look depth. Okay, so let's add some materials to our scene. So let's do it. This will be our pipette. Drop that in here. It's our pipette material. Let's make a membrane material for our membrane. That's our membrane. Let's make a nucleus. Actually, you know what? We're just gonna use the membrane material for the whole cell for now. Okay. Let's make a needle material. Drop it to the needle, and we need an environment for this to, well, yeah, okay. We need an environment. So let's create a sky object here. Put a material for the sky. Call this environment. Drop it in, and we don't need any reflectance. And in the color channel, we just add a gradient. Go into the gradient. Make sure it's on the V, and let's make some colors. Let's say maybe a dark bluish color here, dark bluish color here. Maybe this is kind of a light bluish color, something like that. Just go a little darker. Now let's go into our needle material, and we want to make this kind of a chrome material. So all you got to do, really, you can change the color to something a little dark, and let's add a Beckman, and that's pretty much it, I think. Let's render that real quick. Okay, cool. For our pipette, we're gonna turn on transparency, and I don't think we need any colors. Well, that doesn't really matter. And in our preset, we have a bunch of different presets. Let's just use, say, glass, right? And in our reflectance, we have a default specular. I don't think we need that. We can just turn that off. Let's do a quick render. Okay, there it is. Not bad. Okay, and for our cell, this is going to be our membrane. We're going to use pretty much the same thing. Turn on transparency, and let's use the water preset. Reflectance one more time. We don't need the specular. Let's render that real quick. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. So I'm going to duplicate the membrane and make that my nucleus, because I want to make this a little darker so we can differentiate it. So I'm going to apply it to the nucleus, and what I'm going to do is make the color a little darker and turn down the intensity of the transparency. Let's render that real quick. Okay, so we see a little differentiation. And real quick, we see the sky object right here, the background, but I don't actually want to see this, so I'm going to add a compositing tag and check sync by camera, and I'm actually going to add a background, a different background. Create a material for the background, and similarly to our sky object, just in the color channel, I'm going to add a gradient, and for the type, I'm going to use circular, and it's going to be very light blue to a kind of a darker, subtle greenish blue color, like that. Let's do a render real quick. Yeah, okay, that looks a little better. I am also going to add a light, area light in our scene. Let's move that up, rotate it so it's pointing down, and make sure that it's long and skinny. and in our light settings, I want to make sure that it shows in our reflection, and it also has a fall off to look a little nicer. Somewhere right here. And let's make another material for these little bubbles inside. So I'm going to duplicate or apply this material to our cloner, which will name as our bubbles. And for this, I'm going to change the color to something like a darkish color, and I'm going to turn on alpha, and I'm going to add F for now to our alpha. So let's take a quick render. Yeah, okay, there it is. So that looks starting to take shape. For our, okay, increase the size of our light. See what that happens. See what that does. Very nice, very nice. And I usually don't spend too much time try to lock down my look in 3D. I like to do a lot of my final color correction or whatever in post in After Effects. So my philosophy usually is just to get everything looking somewhat somewhat decent enough, because I know that in After Effects I will have I have a lot more tricks to make things look awesome. So this looks pretty good. One last thing I want to add is just a little noise to let's say my cell, because right now it looks very very smooth. So let's find that nucleus material and let's add a bump to it, and in our bump channel let's add a noise, and I think I like this the dent, and maybe I turn down the strength. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, okay, cool. Not bad, not bad. I'll do the same thing for the membrane. Add a little bump to it. Add a noise, and maybe turn that down real small. See what that looks like. You know what? I think I'm gonna add the same dent for my noise, and very small. %. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. You just need 1%. It's very, very subtle. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty good. I think we're ready. I think we're ready to render this out. So, and let's do let's see what it looks like right here. Let's do our interactive render region, just right here. Okay, you know what? I'm happy with what we've got so far. So let's cap this off around, say, 192 frames, and let's run now animation. And instead of 1080, I'm going to do 720 because just to save some time for rendering. And output, let's do all frames. Save. Let's create cells. 3. PNG, alpha channel, everything's good. Okay, cool. I'm gonna render this to picture viewer, and I'm gonna pause this, and when it's done, we'll come back and continue. Welcome back, everybody, and we have just completed our render, and I have imported into After Effects, and this is the render that we just did, and just by itself, there's no effects added to it at all, and it looks pretty good. So here we are in After Effects, and we're going to start our compositing phase of our animation. So basically what I did is, in addition to our basic render, which I added a texture, a 3D glass texture, which you can find if you just type in 3D glass texture in Google. I just found one of these photos or one of these pictures. You can find one. And also for the part where I injected this ink thing, I actually used a stock footage from an old Video Copilot package that I got from a long time ago called Riot Gear. I don't know if you guys remember, but yeah, I have a lot of stuff on Video Copilot. They have great stuff. So there's this bunch of ink flows that they're just like black and white footages, because you can spend time try to like simulate using X particles or something. Or in my case, I'm just like, you know what, I already have this, so why not? I'm just gonna use some compositing skills and comp it in. So that's what I did. I guess I'll include this in with this. I'll include this project with this tutorial, so you guys can play with it. I don't know if that's legal, but whatever. Let's do this. So okay, let's composite this. So this is our default render. Well, I'm gonna add a solid layer, and it's gonna be my background, and I'm gonna apply the ramp to it. I'm gonna swap the colors, and I'm gonna change it to like a light blue to a dark tealish blue, I guess. Make that into a radial. Bring this down to the middle, bring this out, and we can crank up the scatter for any banding that involves. And now I can also change this to a 16-bit channel. Bring that to the bottom, and I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay or even highlight. I like to play around with some of the blending modes. Highlight looks pretty good. Overlays, nah, close enough. So at this point, I'm going to add a adjustment layer. I'm going to call that my color correction layer, and my favorite effect, which is curves. So I'm going to just boost the contrast. Oops, boost the contrast a little bit. Right. For my gradient ramp, I can even something like that. So this is where this is where you have fun. This for me, I love this part. It's just kind of like trying different things to make something interesting that looks good to you. Maybe I blue a little bit. Okay. Next, I am going to. You know what? I'm gonna create a depth of field effect. See, one of the things to make things look very like microscopic and is this shallow depth of field look. And to create that, I am simply gonna use I'm gonna create a solid, make that a white color, and I'm gonna use no, not that one. I'm gonna use a circle or ellipse tool. Feather that out, actually make that in, break that out, feather, and then pre-comp this, and then call this a depth of field map. I'm going there. I'm going to add another solid and put it in the background or in the back, so there's no alpha channel. Go back here, go back to my main comp. Get another adjustment layer, I call it depth of field, and I'm going to apply the Frisch Luft depth of field effect, which is awesome. I'm going to select my map layer, click the middle, and just crank up the radius. And this does a really nice job of creating this effect. And can play with some of these settings a little bit, and yeah, so basically the map is like where the white area is in focus and the black area is completely blurred, right? So you can like kind of like play around with this. Maybe bring this in. Take a look at this. Okay, very cool. Now I'm gonna bring in my my texture layer. My texture. I'm gonna create a curves to it, and I'm gonna crush the curves quite a bit. And I am going to color dodge this on top of it, but I'm gonna drop it beneath the depth of field layer. And I'm also gonna add a mask. I'm gonna subtract the mask. I'm going to bring this in, subtract the mask, and feather it out quite a bit, like so. Right? Actually, something like that. And I can turn down the opacity quite a bit. And you know what, before I do anything, I'm going to solo this layer real quick too. Another trick I like, because we were talking about earlier about creating this kind of like fluidy environment. If you look closely at my at these textures, right, they're kind of like moving a little bit. So to create that effect, you can use this thing called Turbulence Displace, and if you turn the size really small, make the amount, I don't know, like 30, and if you keyframe, say the evolution, say like 5 times, if you scrub through, they're just kind of like moving, creating this kind of these little movements. I think looks pretty cool. Even play with the complexity. Right, so just do a quick rem preview, see how fast they're going. Not bad. Yeah, okay. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna unsolo this. So we have that happening right here. We can duplicate this layer, and in fact rotate it by 180 degrees, and we can scale that up, that in, and in fact we can put this on top of it and really tune down the opacity as well. Play with the curves a little bit. So, you know, at this point, you're gonna just like, I'm just kind of like free balling. I don't know, you know, every time I do this, I do a little differently. I mean, obviously this one I made it very subtle, so maybe I should do that, but maybe we can make it a little different than the one I made previously. Yeah, something like that. And what you can do is you can just keyframe the scale of both of these guys a little bit, so that it feels like they're kind of like, you know, they're just like movements, additional movements on top of it. And you can also add maybe like a overall glow to this whole thing. See how that looks. Crank up the radius, turn it way down. .1. See? Right, okay. I think we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere, and so let's count the ink thing in. So when this ink comes in, I'll drop my ink shot. So it comes out like that, and right now the whole thing is kind of slow. So I'm gonna right click, go to time stretch, and make it like 30%. So it's a lot. So it happens a lot quicker. And I'm gonna cut it off. I want to begin right here. In fact, I'm gonna invert my layer, and I'm gonna color burn on top of everything, or maybe even multiply. Color burn. Let's try multiply. Yeah, color burn is fine. Add another curves to it. Crush it. You know what? I'm gonna use multiply because for the color, and scale this down. In fact, I'm gonna draw a mask around it. Just around what this is, and feather this out. And let's find the place where the needle comes in, somewhere here, and it comes out right around here. So I can keyframe the opacity real quick, and I can also keyframe the scale. Press U to show all my keyframes. Start from 0, select them, hit F9 to easy ease. So let's do a run preview real quick. Boom. Alright. Alright, cool. Not bad, not bad. And of course, with any compositing, what you can do is you can duplicate the layer, rotate it, scale it differently. Oops. Maybe make this a little smaller, and maybe change this to color burn. Yeah. There we go. That's looking dope. And we want this dirty glass texture over here. This is kind of annoying the fuck out of me right now. Let's turn this off. And another thing I did is I just added some color to it, which I thought was kind of cool. To do that, very easy. Create a solid layer. Change it to a color. Say fill to a red color. Doesn't matter. Maybe a darker red. Turn it off real quick, and I'm just I'm gonna create a mask. Feather the mask, and change the blending mode to color. And I'll keyframe the opacity from 0 to 100. So, and we can even adjust the mask. But that's the idea right here. And I think one final thing that I did, just add an overall grain to everything, which is very simple to do. You can just, there's a effect called add grain, and turn the viewing mode to final output, and you have some grain. And you can go in there and adjust the settings, but I think we're good. And one last thing, to add a additional effects. I'm going to pre-comp everything. I'm going to call this cell pre-comp. I want to add kind of a shaky cam, kind of wobbly shaky cam effect, and that's very simple. You just gotta create a camera, right? Let's make a 35 preset. Yep. Create a null object. Parent the camera to the null object. Turn your position on, and I'm going to add a wiggle expression to my position. So maybe 0.5, 30, something like that. And I'm going to turn my pre-comp into a 3D layer. So now it's kind of like doing little shaky moves, but we don't want this to happen. See the edge. So real quick, so trick I learned from Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot. Add a motion tile, mirror edges, and just crank up your settings. And now if we want to do a little pre-comp, or let's run preview. You know what? I'm going to pause this as we run preview. Alright, we're back, and it has done. It's finished run previewing, and let's take a look. So yeah, I mean that's pretty good. I feel. I mean, for as quickly as we done it. So that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and find it helpful. I will see you next time. Thank you.